They're coming around. Watch it. Too bad at 6 o'clock up. Coming in. Dive now, Chief.
He's in trouble out at 2 o'clock. Watch him.
Got an engine on fire. Yeah, they're breaking it level. Breaking it level. I got him. Watch that fire coming at 3 o'clock. He's coming in a half roll. Pour up, Chief. Pour up. 17 out of control at 3 o'clock. Keep your eye on him, Bill. See any parachutes, Quinlan? Come on, you guys, get out of that plane. Sail out. Why didn't he come out of the bomb bay?
Yeah, I see him.
There's a tail gunner coming out.
Watch out for fire.
In 1942, the construction of a heavy bomber airfield for the 8th Air Force, 5 miles southeast of Royston in Hertfordshire, to the west of and around Nuthampstead village, and on the Hertfordshire-Essex border, was approved. The 814th and the 630th Engineer Battalions of the US Army immediately began construction, with the 1st Battalion of the 346th Engineer Regiment assisting in the final stages. 3 concrete and tarmac runways were laid. 230 was 2,000 by 50 yards, 350 was 1,400 by 50 yards, and 290 was 1,400 by 50 yards as well. These were extended to 2,430, 2,015 and 2,200 yards respectively. 50 concrete spectacle type hard standings were laid off the perimeter track. The administration, technical and barracks were sited to the west of the airfield, in and around Nuthampstead village. These were mostly of the temporary Nissen huts variety. 2 T2 hangars were erected, both fronting the technical site. The bomb stores were in woodland to the south of the airfield, with the ammunition dump adjacent and just to the north of it. The main fuel store was to the east of the airfield, opposite the technical site, while a smaller fuel store lay above and adjacent to the technical site. A control tower of the Watch Office for all commands 1277941, with small front windows to 1537141, was built, alas, now demolished. The total population of the airfield was given as 421 USAAF officers and 2,473 enlisted men. The 17th century Woodman's Inn, adjacent to the airfield, served as the officers' mess. With the airfield complete, the official dedication ceremonies were held on the 17th of June 1943. The base was formally named Station 131 in the USAAF 8th Air Force and assigned the pundit code of NT. Although built as a bomber base, the first resident unit was the 55th Fighter Group, the Fightin Fifty-Fifth, which arrived from McChord Field, Washington on the 14th of September under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Frank B. James. The group consisted of the 38th, the 338th and the 343rd Fighter Squadrons. It was to be the first fighter group equipped with Lockheed P-38H Lightnings. The 55th's Lightnings began operations on the 15th of October, flying long-range escort missions over occupied Europe. Colonel Jack S. Jenkins took over as the group's commanding officer on the 6th of February 1944. Shortly after midnight on the 19th, a raid of opportunity was conducted on the station by 8 to 10 enemy aircraft. One 250-kilo bomb exploded on a corner of the airfield, leaving a large crater. None of the dropped bombs caused any casualties or damage. The 55th provided air cover for missions against aircraft plants during Operation Argument, later called Big Week, a sequence of raids by the RAF and USAAF in the period from the 20th to the 25th of February to destroy aircraft factories in central and southern Germany to deplete the Luftwaffe of aircraft before the Normandy landings in June. February also saw the arrival of the 50th Fighter Squadron from Meeks Field in Iceland as a non-operational unit. Its stay was brief, and it was moved again on the 15th of March to RAF Cheddington, Station 113. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Jack Jenkins, in his P-38 named Texas Ranger, led the 55th on the 3rd of March to become the first Allied fighter group to reach Berlin on an escort mission. On the 10th, Lieutenant Colonel Jenkins was shot down over France, was captured and held as a prisoner of war. Colonel George T. Crowell immediately took over as the commanding officer, just in time to oversee the group's move to Wormingford in Essex on the 16th. The 55th had lost 12 aircraft while at Nuthampstead. The 55th were replaced at Nuthampstead by the 398th Bombardment Group under the command of Colonel Frank P. Hunter Jr., which arrived on the 22nd from Rapid City, South Dakota, with Boeing B-17Gs. The group consisted of the 600th, 601st, 602nd and 603rd Bombardment Squadrons. The tail code for the aircraft was a Triangle W. The 398th flew its first combat mission on the 6th of May, and thereafter flew a total of 195 missions in the next 12 months, primarily against strategic objectives in Germany, attacking targets such as factories in Berlin, warehouses in Munich, marshalling yards in Saarbrücken, shipping facilities in Kiel, oil refineries in Merseburg, and aircraft plants in Munster. The 398th attacked coastal defences and enemy troops on the Cherbourg Peninsula during the invasion of Normandy in June, and in September they attacked gun positions near Eindhoven. The Glenn Miller Orchestra visited Nuthampstead on the 2nd of October, playing in a T2 hangar packed out with the servicemen of the airfield, as well as local residents and invited guests. One airman remembered the concert.
That sound was something in that hangar. I thought the roof might come off. I mean, people went nuts.
On the 15th of October, the mission was Cologne, and shortly after taking off, 42-97746 crashed into the village of Anstey, just a few miles to the south. Fortunately, the bomber missed all the houses and crashed into the moat surrounding the old Anstey Castle motte behind St George's Church. However, all 10 crewmen were killed. On the same mission, while flying through intense flak over Cologne, 43-38172, Lovely Julie, of the 601st, piloted by Lawrence Delancey and Phil Stileman, took a direct burst from an 88mm shell in the nose section, blowing it apart. The blast had blown away much of the nose, covering the windshield with debris and making it difficult to see. The instrument panel was torn away and all flight instruments were inoperative. The radio and intercom were gone, the oxygen lines ruptured, and at 27,000 feet they needed oxygen. Descending rapidly to 2,000 feet, turning left and hoping they were heading west towards England, they picked up a pair of P-51s who escorted them across Belgium, even though with no radio they were unable to communicate with the Mustangs. Once over England, navigator Ray Ledoux began to pick up landmarks and give course corrections that brought them right to Nuthampstead.
It was a great bit of navigation. Ray just stood there on the flight deck and gave us the headings for memory. The landing was strictly by guess and feel.
The B-17 glided in for a fast landing, taking up the entire runway with failing brakes until it came to a stop in the mud at the end of the concrete. Delancey was awarded the Silver Star for his miraculous feat of flying skill. Stileman was awarded an oak leaf cluster for his Distinguished Flying Cross, and Ledoux received the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary navigation skill. During the Battle of the Bulge in December, the 398th raided power stations, railroads and bridges. On the 23rd of January 1945, the 398th's commander, Colonel Frank Hunter, was killed while leading a mission to Neuss on the outskirts of Dusseldorf. His fortress took a direct flak burst to a wing and went into a steep dive and flat spin. Writing about the crash in a letter, pilot and sole survivor Lieutenant Federico Gonzalez recalled,
"We received a direct flak hit on our left wing tip, and it broke away flush with the outboard engine. We struggled trying to control the spin to give the men time to bail out. Nobody made it, probably because of the tremendous centrifugal force. The plane did not explode, but went into a flat inverted spin. I couldn't do anything to get it out of the spin. As I unbuckled and reached for my chute, I was immediately thrown against the windscreen, unable to move. I remember only about 5 turns, and then nothing until I came to on the ground. Colonel Hunter was dead."
On the 29th of January, Lieutenant Colonel Lewis P. Ensign took over as the commanding officer of the group. On the 14th of February 1945, on a mission to bomb the marshalling yards in Dresden, 38 aircraft of the 398th bombed Prague by mistake. The radar navigational equipment on the aircraft was not functioning correctly, and high winds en route produced a dead reckoning navigational error of some 70 miles. The 398th, led by Colonel Ensign, was followed by 2 squadrons of the 91st Bomb Group, amounting to 62 bombers in total, who dropped 152 tons of bombs from 25,000 feet at around 12:35 p.m, hitting the centre of the city and residential areas. Fortunately, the rest of the formation, realising that they were far off course, bombed targets of opportunity. During March, the 398th flew missions to aid the Allied assault across the Rhine by bombing German airfields. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur F. Briggs took over as the commanding officer of the group on the 18th of April. On the 25th, He was in command of the group's last operation, the bombing of the Skoda plant at Pilsen in Czechoslovakia. After VE Day, the 8th of May 1945, the 398th transported liberated prisoners of war from Germany to France. But the post-war wind-down was rapid, and towards the end of the month, the B-17 crews departed Nuthampstead to fly to Drew Field in Florida. The ground crews followed on the 22nd of June, travelling home by sea. The 398th Bomb Group had flown 195 combat missions, losing 58 B-17 Fortresses, with 294 airmen killed in action. An empty Nuthampstead was transferred to the RAF on the 10th of July, who then gave it to Maintenance Command for No. 95 MU based at Ridgewell, to use as a sub-site for ordnance storage and disposal until the 27th of January 1948. It was then transferred to No. 94 Maintenance Unit until the 1st of October 1949, and then returned to No. 95 Maintenance Unit until the 30th of October 1954. At this point, Nuthampstead was transferred to RAF Duxford Control and No. 11 Group, and stayed there until the 1st of March 1959, when the unused airfield was finally closed, sold off, and quickly reverted to farmland. Approximately 7/8 of the runways and perimeter tracks were broken up and used as hardcore for the M1 motorway. Following closure, a small grassed runway landing strip was built by a group of local business people alongside the northern edge of the main runway, where, on the 7th of March 1969, a Piper PA-22 crash-landed. In the late 1960s, Nuthampstead had been one of the sites considered for London's third airport, but it was ultimately rejected. The airfield was used in the 1980s by the local Air Training Corps, who held an annual fly-in there. These days were held at the same time as the Duxford Air Shows, and the ATC were particularly adept at persuading aircraft to reroute to Nuthampstead after the Duxford display. The Forestry Commission planted conifers on the site of the bomb store, but this is now being returned to its original broadleaf forest. A large number of abandoned ordnance was found, and the site was declared unsafe for several months while RAF bomb disposal teams recovered the wartime ordnance. For a short time, the western tip of the east-west runway was used as a cart track. Today, it is used for storage by a local farm. The surviving technical buildings are occupied by local businesses, and the northern edge of the airfield is now the Nuthampstead shooting ground for clay pigeon shooting. The airfield is also home to the Radio Navigation Ground Station, Barkway, VOR DME, for London Heathrow and Stansted airports. Airfield memorials to the 398th and the 55th are located next to the Woodman Inn. The Nuthampstead Airfield Museum is situated behind the inn. A link to the museum website is given in the description below. Adam Gurney wrote on the Luton Paranormal website that he decided to visit Nuthampstead along with an old school friend in 1984. The airfield, he noted, was deserted and had only a few remaining buildings and a section of runway. Just after dusk, they drove onto the runway. 20 minutes later, Adam suddenly felt compelled to look in the rearview mirror, and when he did so, he was surprised to see a ghostly horse and rider bearing down on the car at full gallop. Adam nudged his friend, who looked round at the figure, then quickly locked his door. Adam drove off as fast as he could, and realising he couldn't go fast enough with the potholes, Adam drove round a clump of trees and turned off his car's engine and lights. When the figure did not appear, Adam drove back on the runway only to find that the horse and rider had vanished. Harvey Ditchman wrote on the Key Publishing Aviation Forum about his experience at Nuthampstead in 1986. For many years his Air Training Corps squadron held their annual fly-in at Nuthampstead. They had an advisory air traffic control in place, and on the Saturday morning it was Harvey's turn on the radio. He finished his stint and was preparing for the afternoon orienteering exercise around the station. As I have mentioned in the history, after the Second World War, bomb disposal was called in to clear the whole site, including the wooded areas. The map reading exercise took them into one of these areas, which had concrete roads situated within it, and they were told on no account to leave the roadways just in case. As they wandered through the area, they saw a Nissan hut and decided to have a look around. As they left it, a 1940s style big band started playing as if on radio. Needless to say, they left rather fast. Vic Jenkins wrote in Flak News that he was one of the maintenance party of about 30 RAF personnel at Nuthampstead in late June of 1945. At the time of the handover of the airfield from USAAF to the Royal Air Force. Whilst on guard duty, the topic invariably moved on to ghosts, and one member admitted that he had seen a figure dressed in full flying gear in the mortuary on numerous occasions. Others finally admitted that they felt a strange presence when they entered the building. Not long after this, Vic was on patrol checking out B Hangar, and although he had a flashlight, it was very dark inside. Suddenly, there was the very faint sound of 1940s big band music. Frozen to the spot by the sound, he listened, and just as quickly as it had started, it stopped, and all was deathly quiet again. Some of the other airmen with him told of hearing talking and laughing coming from the deserted squadron huts that straddled the road to the back gate and hospital. A recent addition to the file comes from Oliver Webb, who emailed me on the 2nd of September this year with the following account. My late father did his national service at RAF Nuthampstead, disarming a stockpile of surplus bombs. I remember him telling me various stories from his time there. Apparently there was an area to the end of one of the runways that had a lot of molten aluminium on the ground, where a plane had crashed during the war. There were accounts of airmen being spotted, despite the airfield no longer being in operation. Dad also heard the sound of big aero engines being run up, but never saw anything. From the Luton Paranormal website, we have the following accounts from the 17th century Woodman Inn, which is immediately adjacent to former Nuthampstead Airfield, and served as the officers' mess for the 398th. In 1980, the landlord of the Woodman was sitting at a table in the bar when a chair pulled up to the table by itself. The landlord, thinking it may be a trick, looked under the chair for wires, etc., but was astonished to find nothing. This is not the only time that this has happened, and people believe that something pulls the chair up and settles itself in for the evening. The pub showcases a collection of photographs of the World War II station, along with a large map pinpointing locations on the airbase. One of these pictures is said to fall off the wall for no apparent reason. The picture is always the same one, of a B-17 bomber which returned to Nuthampstead with a large hole blown in the nose of the aircraft, and the explosion had killed the bomb aimer. This was 43-38172 Lovely Julie of the 601st. There is also the reported feeling that someone is standing next to you whilst in the bar, when there is no one there, and also that footsteps have been heard walking overhead when there was no one upstairs. One final ghost is that of a small, silver-haired old woman who has been seen walking through the bar area.